You painstakingly paint every single detail, but your watercolor landscape still looks flat and cluttered. Honestly, paint what you see is a lie. Imagine stopping the endless detailing, using soft edges to tell your viewer exactly where to look. Here's why. Your eyes never see a landscape with 100% sharp focus. If you paint every detail, break the illusion of space. I painted tight for 20 years. Then I saw Joseph Bookbich's urban landscape, half the details missing, and I couldn't stop looking at it. It was never about more detail. It was about knowing what to leave soft. Let's break down exactly how to plan your focus. Look at the reference photo. Everything is in sharp focus. The clouds, the mountains, and even the treetops. You can see the treetops. These shadows have some sharp edges. The foliage behind the flowers, these tall flowers, the chairs, the grass, the stone path, everything. So what do you choose? I'm going to add mist in front of the mountain, and that will soften them. Plus, this will all be one shape. You'll see how I do that. These leaves that are behind the flowers, I'm going to soften them. They're not important. The color is important, but the shapes are not important, so they'll be soft. The flowers and the chairs will be in sharp focus, except that I will add in some soft bloom color that will be the backdrop for the sharp edges that I'll put on the flowers, and that will help these flowers pop. That's how I'm planning focus for this painting. Normally I would start with the sky, but I want to start with the mountains because I'm trying to establish a little bit of mist. I'm choosing to paint mist to create distance and depth. By pre-wetting the paper in certain spots, I can paint next to the water to let the paint bleed into it. This will make naturally soft clouds. So because I'm connecting these shapes, you're going to see the paint move around. In between the wet areas, I'm painting wet on dry. Because I let the paintbrush touch the wet spots, the bleeding acts like wet into wet. For a line drawing of this scene, see the link in the description. Now that most of the mountain shape is painted in, I'll add a darker version of the blue mixture to give the mountain some shape. Notice how these are soft shapes, not as defined as what we see in the photo. Adding other colors like Winsor violet and shadow green, which is a bluish green, also helps to add shape. I'm dampening the violet here. When a color is too strong, it pulls the focus the same way a sharp edge does. This is where most artists rely on values, lights and darks, but values alone aren't enough. You can have a perfect range of values and still end up with a painting that feels cluttered and flat because every single edge is fighting for attention. A sharp edge says, "Look here." If everything has a sharp edge, your viewer doesn't know where to look. Soft edges are how you tell them this part isn't the point. With my board tilted, I'm using shadow green mixed with undersea green to paint in the mid-ground foliage in soft focus. That'll push them towards the mountains and out of the foreground. Now that the base color of the foliage is down, I'm adding in much more concentrated shadow green and undersea green in spots to show shadow and three-dimensional shapes. Because I'm working wet into wet, the foliage will remain in soft focus. With a damp brush, I'm fading the base of the foliage to make room for the flowers I'll paint in underneath. But the base of the foliage was too close to where the flowers need to go. To fix this, I'm using a tissue to blot out the base even more. If you want to follow along and ask questions as I paint, I do live demos weekly in my school community. The link is in the description. See how the soft edges make them seem out of focus? That's not an accident. That's the point. The foliage isn't the subject, the flowers and chairs are. By keeping the foliage soft, I'm doing the viewer's work for them. They will naturally go to the sharpest thing in the painting. That's going to be those flowers and chairs. We haven't painted them yet, but when we do, it will tell the viewer where to look. This is how we use edges to create depth. While the foliage is drying, I'll paint in the sky using wet into wet. I'm starting with cobalt blue and dropping in some burnt sienna to make gray shadows on the clouds. See how that blends on the page? Here I link the cloud in front of the mountain with the cloud above it. My eye is just not liking that hard edge, so I'm going to get rid of it. Okay, I'm not ready to spatter yet. What I want to do is I want to work wet into wet again with the colors that I will use for the flowers. Most of the flower colors are semi-opaque, which will give me good coverage when I paint those hard edges. I'm using a smaller brush so I can avoid painting over the highlights on the backs of the chairs. I'm wetting the paper to paint in the flowers, wet into wet. The soft edges of the flowers I'm painting now will help the sharp focus flowers I'll paint later on to stand out. I'm dropping in cadmium yellow here. Since the paper is wet, the color is spreading, making soft edges. This is Serpentine Genuine for the stems and leaves that will be more suggested rather than stated. I'm still painting wet into wet here. To get some height on the blooms, I'm using red, orange, and yellow cadmiums wet on dry to keep those colors concentrated for better coverage over the green foliage. The sharp edges will keep them in focus. Everything behind these flowers is soft. These blooms are hard-edged and concentrated. That contrast is doing all the work, not the color, not the value alone, the edge quality. That's what makes them pop forward. I'm touching the yellow to the orange while they're still wet to make the colors blend a little, and this adds a 3D effect. For the wooden backs of the chairs, I'm using a combination of raw umber with cobalt blue to make a brownish color, then dropping in some burnt sienna for variety. I'll leave some gaps between the boards. This is the first layer on the wooden backs. And I'm doing a little negative painting here. Now, in the photograph, you can see that there's some dark areas between the boards on the back of the chair. And I may still do that. Starting with a more dilute turquoise, I'm painting the first layer of the rockers. I'll mix this periwinkle, a semi-opaque color, with other colors for the flowers on the left. Those other colors are Winsor violet with quinacridone rose. I'm also preparing some Dr. P.H. Martin's bleed-proof white to use with the flowers on the left. Oh, I got a big blob. Okay, I'm going to use that. I'll use instead of having to dip back into my cap for my white. So now I'm going in reverse. I'm taking that spill I had where I got too much of the white and I've dabbed it down below. And so then making that the light side of the flower, now I'm going back onto the left side of the flowers so I have a little bit of shadow with the color that I just mixed up. Now it's time to spatter paint. We have these that they're looking a little better, but I want to get more details down in here, but I don't want it to be, these look sort of blobby and regular to me, and I don't want it to be that way. So now I'm going to attach my little cutouts. What I'm going to do is take this kneaded rubber eraser, and they act like little tacky glue. And this can, even though it's an eraser, I can get things to stick and then it comes off. Now I'll spatter with cadmium yellow and cadmium red and then spray, which will cause some of the droplets to spread. So some of these are pretty big droplets. I'm going to spatter some white paint, and I think that'll help bring these flowers out a little bit more. See how easy it is to remove the appliques? Now, while this white paint is drying, I can continue to work on the backs of these chairs and on the grass. Now, these are sitting on kind of a stone overlook, and I'll put that color in as well. I will start with that color, and then I'll work on the grass. The color of the stone is a dilute mixture of cobalt blue plus raw umber. Paint the grass soft. There's no need to detail every blade. Just soften the edge of the brushstroke with a damp brush, and the viewer will know that it's grass. I'm painting in the shadow on the backs of the chairs with the turquoise I mixed using cobalt blue and Hansa Yellow Deep to a fairly concentrated dilution. The consistency is like milk. I'm adding in the final value on the wooden backs of the chairs. A darker green on the base of the flowers pushes them away from the chairs and into their own plane. Look what's happening here. Painting exactly what you see gives you merely a map where all the details compete for attention. Knowing where to put your soft edges gets you atmosphere and depth. Sharp where it matters and soft everywhere else. People viewing your painting will be guided by your design without realizing it, but you do. You now know how to plan and paint soft and hard edges for more depth. If value is still a challenge for you, I cover that in this video.